Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. The war in Ukraine is telling us something about contested territories. India, in its own self, has a lot to garner with in this particular domain. The fight with Pakistan, the fight with China, and of course, the fingering around that the Chinese have got done through Nepal is all about disputed land. And that is something that we must try and see. Are we learning lessons from the Ukraine war, as well as the factor are our adversaries learning from the Ukraine war? To discuss this, I have with me Lieutenant General Gautam Moorthy, who's going to take us through this very interesting part that tells us that tomorrow's wars probably are going to go back to the land capturing aspect or the land claiming aspect or the territorial disputes. Sir, thank you so much for joining me. Lot many people are not talking about this subject. I thought it's a different way of looking at things.
Thank you, Aadi, and good afternoon to you and your viewers. Jai Hind to everybody. Yes, this is a very interesting war to study, although I should not be using the word interesting because of the number of casualties it's causing, untold human misery, over 3 million refugees. There are a lot of lessons. Every war has its lessons, and this war too has its lessons.
For us and our, adversaries or enemies or, friendly
Yes.
neighbors, if I may put it that way.
You're right. You see, in the Indo-Pak context, if you look at this war, and if Pakistan also looks at it, what is the basic problem between India and Pakistan? It is only Jammu and Kashmir. Everything else can be sorted out. Everything, what had to work, like the Indus Water Treaty. But Jammu and Kashmir will continue to be a thorn in the flesh of Indo-Pak relations. You mentioned the word border. Yes, what is the border? The border has moved from side to side in Kashmir. According to India, it's very clear that Kashmir in its entirety belongs to India, and that both Pakistan and China falsely laying claim to its territory. India views the instrument of accession that was signed by the Maharaja Hari Singh, as legally binding, and hence Kashmir's accession to India, the whole state, was legal and fair. Apart from that, J&K is extremely important to India's national security. The Siachen Glacier, you could call it the only barrier between Pakistan and China. In the face of a conflict, and you are well aware of the kind of discussions that was going on when the Chinese intruded into eastern Ladakh about a China-Pakistan collusion and combining forces, gravely endangering India. You see, but what happened is that India could hold its own. Galwan happened, Pakistan was observing it very closely. But I'll take you back to a year and a half ago when Article 370 was virtually abolished. It was defanged. That drove the point home. Both China and Pakistan are acutely aware of this. Unhappy as they are over this development, there's precious little they can do about it. And if you look at borders in 1963, Pakistan ceded the entire Shaksgam Valley and a part of Gilgit to China. That region was originally a part of Maharaja Hari Singh's Jammu and Kashmir kingdom, the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Later on, it became a part of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And this ceding of the ceding of the Shaksgam Valley to China was clearly done in order to undermine India and to allow Chinese military presence in Kashmir. India does not and cannot accept this. With China and Pakistan strengthening the ties and increasing deployment of Chinese and Pakistani troops, as well as the CPEC corridor, this region has become very, very important and is a flashpoint. The only thing that's keeping Pakistan or China from doing anything is a strong India. Strong India economically, a strong India militarily, and a strong India in every which way that you see. Pakistan believes that Kashmir was illegitimately ceded to India by a ruler who did not represent the people. But apart from that, Pakistan also knows that the Kashmir Valley and upwards towards the Ladakh region, there's a plethora of resources. Pakistan is dependent on the Kashmiri rivers, the rivers that flow through Kashmir. And they actually believe that if India has complete control over Kashmir, it could potentially paralyze Pakistani agriculture, induce droughts and more misery. So China, being a strong ally of Pakistan, and both of them, touching each other through Indian territory, illegally ceded, poses a huge risk for India. The CPEC corridor on which President Xi had bet a lot, as well as a Pakistan polity, it goes through the heart of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And if, I'm saying if Pakistan lost that area, they would lose their China-Pakistan direct link. That would be cut. So Pakistan is very worried about losing POK, but at the same time, they know they can do precious little about J&K. The general view of the people of Pakistan is against India. Let's face that. Many are sympathetic towards the cause of Kashmiris and believe that the people's lives can be bettered. But then, if you ask the the Kashmiris who are living in POK, and you have yourself seen a number of protests over the last few years, they are tired of this conflict. A number of people have criticized the government for, betting everything. It's a bad way to play poker, that you bet whatever you have only on one hand. They have maintained the view that Pakistan cannot afford to lose Kashmir and India has no legal moral right. And therefore, they keep calling for UN mediation or anybody else to come and mediate. But over the years, much water has flown down the five rivers. No agreeable solution seems in sight. There is talk of back channel, track to diplomacy taking place. One doesn't know what will happen. Both countries zealously guard their territory. But unless either India or Pakistan ups the ante or China bowls a googly, I see status quo being maintained. The Indian army is strong, the Indian armed forces are strong, and they are not going to permit any kind of misadventure by Pakistan or China. So, in our context, borders contested, forces on either side, but borders are stable. That's what I'd like to say.
That's actually a good thing, if I may put it that way, sir. But if you look at the Pakistani efforts in Kashmir, and many actually believe that they are backed by China. They've been pretty aggressive right from the get-go. There have been terrorism. They've literally started two major wars with regards to their intrusion, and of course the Kargil conflict that actually took place between India and Pakistan. The Russians, if you look at it, the Russians also are on a hybrid conflict sort of a game. Before this kinetic war actually started in Donbass, in Luhansk, and all those areas, Crimea was another example. So is there something that the Pakistanis could learn from the little green men that we saw of the Russians actually going in, from the hybrid warfare that they undertook in the Kashmir area?
Green is the color of Pakistan. The little green men tried in 1947, 1965, 1999. Where did the little green men go? They went back or they got killed. See, Aadi, the war in Ukraine has yet to play out. Today is the 27th day.
Yeah.
That said, the little green men and their leaders have come to realize that none of the candidates in J&K have succeeded so far. And the virtual abolition of Article 370 and with it Article 35A has seen the relationship of J&K with India in the sense that India has voted unequivocally through its parliament that J&K is an inalienable part of India. This, to my mind, has put the last nail in Pakistan's coffin insofar as its ambitions with respect to J&K is concerned. They also know it deep inside, let's face it. And the comparison between the situation between Russia and Ukraine and that of India and Pakistan is not appropriate. And Pakistani leaders will be drawing all the wrong lessons from this war if they start thinking like President Putin. Today, Imran is fighting to save his own chair. You've seen what kind of political leadership exists in Pakistan. You've seen what kind of military leadership exists. The military is more interested in feathering their nests and keeping India at bay. Misfiring of a missile sets them off. Okay, mature reaction subsequently. But they are on tenterhooks. And the little green men know that the local Kashmiri population will not support them. Didn't this happen in 1947? With Sherwani and his band of brothers who fought heroically? Didn't it happen in 65 when Off Gibraltar failed completely? Didn't it happen in 1999, albeit they had done it on the peaks, but they thought they'd get tremendous support? Isn't the terrorism also waning? How is it that so many terrorists are being killed year upon year, especially after Article 370 was removed? See, terrorism can succeed, like Mao said, guerrillas can succeed only if the people are with them. The people of the Kashmir Valley know that India is with them and they are with India. You've seen pictures on Republic Day, on Independence Day, of the Tiranga flying across the Kashmir Valley. Did you see a Pakistani flag? Like the situation was in the early 90s? You see, whenever they've banked on local Kashmiri support, they have failed, and they know that. Also, do not forget, and they know it better than anyone, that in 1971 they learned this lesson the hard way, that Islam is not a unifying factor that they thought it was. Local Kashmiris, rightly so, fear Punjabi domination. You're seeing it right across the line of control. Where Punjabis have bought up tracts of land, they've bought up houses, they live there, and they see the lives of their brethren across the line of control and realize that the Kashmiri here is better, and the Kashmiri here also knows that their life is better under a free and democratic India that is economically far ahead of Pakistan. Ultimately, for the common man, what is it, Aadi? It is roti, kapda, or makan. See, the more Pakistan expends its energies on J&K, the more it will impoverish them. The Pakistan rupee is under constant fall. Prices of fuel, energy, food supplies, all commodities are rising. And the economic bomb that has been dropped on Russia, you will soon find their ripples turning into waves that will hit all countries, including India. But we are a robust economy despite COVID. Our GST collections are getting into an all-time high. Our FDI is high. Our reserves, forex reserves are very high. So although it will affect us, we have this reserve, we have this energy, we have this buffer. Pakistan has no buffer whatsoever. They're already depleted the foreign exchange earnings are depleted. Yes, there have been remittances from mainly the Gulf countries. But apart from that, what do they have? What are they exporting? There's nothing. In fact, while you will see, I want to draw your attention and your readers' attention to the fact that there has been a decline in terrorist activities in the Kashmir Valley, but there's been a spurt of terrorist activities in Pakistan since the Taliban have taken over. Some estimates say there's a jump of 42%.
Mm.
Hence, if you ask me, Pakistan would do well to manage its own affairs rather than embark on any adventurism against India. We would like a stable, a responsible Pakistan that is looking to do good towards its people and looking to live at peace with its neighbours. We don't want them interfering in our internal affairs, and I think they have got this message.
To a large extent, yes, I would agree with you. But there were also reports, and I'm just trying to ask you a counter question to this. There were also reports that the current Pakistani army chief, General Bajwa, has actually been pushing back Imran Khan's efforts to rack up terrorism and rack up non-state, in their language speaking, non-state activity within Kashmir. You also have a willing China who's ready to supply them. Some 25 J-10s have come, and another 75 more or less are going to be coming in to replace the French, because the French have kind of refused to, upgrade the Mirages and stuff like that. So you have that kind of an umbrella which the Pakistanis keep continuing to enjoy. So the nuisance value remains, right? And that is...
There is no denying that. You see, while the nuisance value remains, and Pakistan is not about to get defanged overnight, if you recollect when General Bajwa took over as chief, amongst the first thing he says that the enemies are here, we have to tackle them first. And he has gone out of his way, and I would say expended some military capital amongst his own people, I'm quite sure, to have pushed for the ceasefire, to have pushed for everything. Under him, the Pakistan military has been quiet. They have not raked up issues unnecessarily. Their former DG ISI, of course, went preening like a peacock to Kabul, but then the inside story and how he was sidelined and he's been sent off to Levenport, although Imran wanted him there. Bajwa did not allow any of his generals to play politics. He's of a firm grip, the army. He understands ceasefire is better. And let me tell you a little more about him from what I know. I met him in 2008 when I visited Islamabad. He had just returned from Congo. We were both brigadiers then. And he conveyed his regards to the officers whom he had served with and had highest respect at that time, which he asked me to convey to our chief then, General Vikram Singh, who was at that time a corps commander. And he was his boss, and he told me, he says, I've operated with Indian Army officers and we've had an excellent relationship. I mean, why would he come and seek me out and tell me all this? So General Bajwa knows what is good for his country. He will get his weapons. He will, being a Pakistani chief, he will remain cautious of India. But under him, I doubt there will be any adventurism of the sort that you saw under General Musharraf in Kargil or earlier in 65. That kind of adventurism is not likely to be. Besides, do not forget that India has also responded in a salutary manner with the surgical strikes, followed by the bombing in Jabbar Top, which is near Balakot, on the terrorist camp there. So this has happened, and although they may deny it officially, they know what has happened. They may have to deny it, but they actually know what has happened and they know this can happen again. And now the line of control is not sacrosanct in the sense that as long as you don't hit us, it's fine. But if you send forces and if we come to know that there are strong camps, large camps, we are not going to accept.
That message indeed is clear. As a matter of fact, it's clear, clearly mentioned in the US security threat analysis that was released in the early part of March 2022, which is this month itself. It states that India's response to any misadventure from Pakistan is going to be very strong. So that I agree with. I'm going to come back to your point about Gilgit-Baltistan. That seems to be the nerve center, for example, for this tri-junction, if I may use that word, between India, Pakistan, and China. There is also a connect to Afghanistan, which is also becoming the center of gravity within this southern Asian region. As long as there is no terrorism, people have kind of kept it on a back burner. But one incident, and I'm sure the entire the focus will get back onto Afghanistan. How do you see the presence of both the Pakistanis and the Chinese in that Gilgit-Baltistan region, considering the fact that we do keep getting statements from the government saying that that area would belong to us one day or the other? And so this is again that territorial dispute that keeps riding up all the time. And it's always towards the Pakistani sides. Not many a times will you say that we will take back Aksai Chin. So that's a very clear distinction which is being presented as well. How do you see both these guys actually trying to protect their assets within Gilgit-Baltistan, sir?
This is a very interesting question. And you have three views. You have an Indian view, you have a Pakistani view, you have a Chinese view. Let's take the Indian view first. There was a parliamentary unanimous resolution passed 22nd February 1994. And India made a very important statement there that the whole of J&K belongs to India. The state of Jammu and Kashmir has been, is, and shall be an integral part of India. And any attempts to separate it from the rest of the country will be resisted by all means. Now I am quoting verbatim. I have noted this down. India has the will and capacity to firmly counter all designs against its unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and demands that Pakistan must vacate the areas of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, which they have occupied through aggression, and resolves that all attempts to interfere in the internal affairs of India will be met resolutely. No change in that? Okay, so while the parliamentary resolution was very clear, there's something missing in this resolution. It did not anywhere state that India should use all means at its disposal to reclaim areas under Pakistan's illegal occupation. Now, whatever the people may say, whatever strategic analysts say, whatever anyone may say, the fact remains is that India, and this is my personal opinion, and I'm speaking purely on my behalf, that India would be happy or continues to be happy with status quo. We are here for our people. We want to build our economy. We want to have a strong economy. We don't want Indians to be jobless. We want a better standard of living. We want to look after our environment. We are concerned about climate change. We are concerned about renewable energy. We are looking at all these issues. I don't see anywhere where we have, of course, there would be plans, etc., etc., but we are not going to go in like Putin did and reclaim our what we consider our territory, and which the parliamentary resolution very firmly and correctly said that is Indian territory. Now, China knows that, Pakistan knows that, and deep inside we also know that. So an uneasy status quo exists, if I may say so. A very uneasy status quo. But there is a status quo existing. And how many times was the status quo disrupted? And by whom was it disrupted? Go back to 1947, go back to 1965, go back to 1989. It was Pakistan that disturbed the status quo. What happened in 1971? Refugees were pouring into our country. Pakistan was committing atrocities, their army was committing atrocities in Bangladesh. We had recognized Bangladesh way back in March 1971. And we had to do something about it. And we did something about it. Pakistan can learn lessons from Bangladesh, whose GDP today is much better than Pakistan's. And the people are living in relative harmony, they are working for themselves. India has no quarrel with them, they have no quarrel with India. We have settled the enclave issues very peaceably with Bangladesh, the water issues. Pakistan must understand this. And Pakistan can also, if they give up this obsession about Kashmir, can come and sit at the table and we can have a talk. And both can sort of take a step back from their hardened positions and arrive at a solution that would be best in the interests of the people of the subcontinent.
A lot many will agree with the factor that you say status quo. I personally do so because at the end of it, we all know that the people staying in the so-called Pakistani occupied Kashmir are not Kashmiris. It's a very different populace that is living there, and I don't think we would want to amalgamate another 4 million of those guys who are probably radicalized or brain poisoned or brainwashed into the hatred that would be there. It'll create a whole new instability for us and a whole other set of problems. So when I look at the Donbass region, it's got people, it has infrastructure, it has all that stuff that was going for it is before this whole fracas took place in 2014 and the entire thing just broke loose. If you look at Arunachal Pradesh, it's also a place where there is a population. It's got its own structure and everything going for itself. Now, when you look at China, I think that's the first thing that they claim about this entire area. Aksai-Chin is a big this thing, but their push has always been towards the east. Firstly, correct me if I'm wrong in that aspect. And secondly, sir, a lot of people today brought in the N word, which is the nuclear word, that if Ukraine would have maintained its nuclear weapons, the Russians wouldn't have been able to do what they're doing. Do you think Indian nuclear umbrella can actually protect the territories in case the Chinese do get aggressive and move in terms of their claims? Is there a possibility of under the umbrella sort of a war that a lot of people are talking about today?
Of course, but before getting onto the nuclear aspect, please see for yourself if there's any desire, even remotely amongst the people of Arunachal Pradesh, to identify themselves with China. How can one compare the people living in Arunachal Pradesh with the state of the people living in Crimea or the Donbass regions?
Absolutely.
There, the majority of the people are Russian speaking and have an affinity with the Russian Federation. Although those areas fell under the country Ukraine, the majority of the people there sided with Russia. On the contrary, if you look at India's borders with China, right from Aksai-Chin in the north to Arunachal Pradesh in the east, not counting Nepal, of course, our borders are with Tibet, now called TAR, Tibetan Autonomous Region. Even China calls it TAR. Our borders are not with mainland China. Our borders are with Tibet. And you will see, and we all know there's more affinity of the people living on either side of it with India rather than with China. Who are the Tibetans loyal to? The Tibetans are loyal to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who has a large following of Tibetan diaspora, not only in India but across the globe. He has a following cutting across all nationalities around the world, especially in Western democracies, which has earned him the richly deserved Nobel Peace Prize. As long as the Dalai Lama or his successor stays with India, the hearts and minds of the Tibetan people will be with India. No amount of financial inducements, infrastructure build-up, 5G connectivity, high-speed railways, what have you, can compensate for the lack of religious freedom and can make the subjugated Tibetans accept China's suzerainty. China fully understands it. We know it. And more importantly, China is also acutely aware that India is quite capable of a quid pro quo at a commensurate level. They saw it and they know at each level we are prepared for a quid pro quo. We therefore, insofar as China is concerned, keep our powder dry and ensure there's no further adventurism from the Chinese side. To my mind, Galwan drove that point home quite hard. As long as we, as our military, is well poised across the McMahon line and the line of control, China will think twice before attempting anything. That, to my mind, is very clear. And the Chinese cannot be sure of the Tibetans' loyalty, whatever they may do. The Tibetans' loyalty is to the Dalai Lama, and may God grant him a long life. But at some point in time, his successor would know that it was India who gave refuge to him. There's a huge Tibetan diaspora here, and they understand fully well what China is. And despite all financial inducements, they are not going to go anywhere close to China. Now, to the nuclear aspect, you brought up a very interesting point. But Aadi, I want to tell your viewers that both China and India profess a no first move policy. We have advocated it, Chinese are also advocated it. Both are responsible powers and both behave responsibly. In fact, China uses nuclear deterrence only to deter nuclear attacks. For them, countering coercion is their main issue. So here one does not see any dichotomy or any difference with India acquiring a nuclear capability, except that China was unhappy about it when we carried out our tests. And why did China go nuclear? Do not forget the Korean War. That shook them. So what bothers us actually about China's nuclear program is their covert and overt help in proliferating nuclear weapons to Pakistan. But can a conventional war take place under a nuclear overhang? The answer to that unequivocally is a yes. That can take place, limited war, limited duration, border skirmish, etc., etc. But even at the height of the tensions at Galwan, subsequently with India occupying the ridge and then China having to come to the table for talks, the Kailash Ridge, no, not a single bullet was fired. That drives home a very important lesson that both of us are powers with huge responsibility. There is competition with China, there's contestation with China, there is confrontation to an extent with China. And as my good friend General Vinod Bhatia often says, China is a competitor, let us not make China an enemy. So anyone watching the Ukraine, the way the Ukrainians are defending themselves, anyone watching this war would be drawing very wrong lessons from what President Putin did, who thought that by going in and you'll be welcome, and if there's light opposition, his army will steamroll that opposition. That has not happened. People will fight for the land. People will not take kindly to anyone else coming in. And as long as the Westphalian nation state kind of geopolitics remains in this world, borders will be contested, but no one is a pushover. And yes, back to your question, if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, would Russia have attacked? I doubt very much. But at the same time, another question that comes to my mind and that I've been pondering about, especially when I saw the mall being hit and the school being hit and civilian targets being hit, does not Ukraine have long-range artillery? Does not Ukraine have missiles? How is it that they have not used it against Russia? Is it because they don't want the war to flare up anymore, or they want to keep it below a threshold? This is a question that I myself haven't got an answer.
There was only one attack on an airbase that was done. That's just about it.
Yeah, airbase is different. I'm talking about a civilian target. I'm talking that is the point. So one really doesn't know, but both Pakistan and China would be, to sum up, to say that both Pakistan and China would be drawing very wrong lessons if they think that they can do what President Putin has done in Ukraine.
I think that's a very very certain fact that you put across, is because things aren't going the way that I think President Putin would have planned for it to go, and everybody presented his war as a blitzkrieg or a lightning war when it started up. But now, I mean, it's bogged down to street fighting, and the dirty part of the war is actually coming out now, which is what we see in the news. So, thank you so much. Sorry, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to say there is the Prussian general who said that no battle plan survives the first encounter. So, with that, I think Putin must have forgotten that lesson, and you find the mess that they are in. Yes. Although they may win, but it will be a very Pyrrhic victory.
The sheer might of the Russian army would just take them through, I guess.
See, there are two aspects. One is actually capturing ground. The other is holding ground. You need boots on the ground. You need people on the ground to hold it. General Hasnain has written a very interesting article today where he says you can't use standout weapons to win a war. You have to have that man on the ground, and that man on the ground should not only be there, capture territory, hold on to it from counterattacks.
And survive there.
And survive there. And then impose your will upon the people. It's not easy. It's not easy. But can't do this. The world is realizing this.
As a matter of fact, the Chinese should be, I think, realizing this factor. There's always a comparison between the Indian rocket forces and the Chinese rocket forces. Standoff weapons are great, but they just boom, boom. It doesn't make you capture the territory. It doesn't make you hold.
You need to hold ground, and you need to hold ground against counterattacks. And holding ground costs lives.
Yeah, we've seen APCs, we've seen tanks, we've seen all that stuff, but we've seen the mechanized force of the Russian army going in. We've not seen infantry kind of holding positions and stuff. And that's something that the Chinese also lack as far as the infantry ground battle strength. So
and then if you're looking at capturing a city, You have to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Urban warfare is the worst form of warfare, the toughest form of warfare. It's not going to be easy.
Lessons of war, sir, I guess, for both the adversaries and as well as
Yes,
us, because a lot of hardliners within India who always say that we should just march in and kind of take over this and take over that, and हम ले लेंगे, हम ये कर लेंगे, वो कर लेंगे. I mean, it's good to
it's okay.
create
It's okay. Let them say.
But I guess this war is going to teach us realities of warfare, and fighting on
We
the
have a. You're right. We have a very sagacious political leadership. They're not into adventurism, but at the same time, we will not brook nonsense.
Absolutely.
That's a simple lesson.
Thank you, sir, for this very balanced and sane conversation. Much is required of these kinds in today's India's strategic, converse, which is actually being put online, because a lot of it is actually a lot of rhetoric, and I always want to keep it away from that. And that's one of the reasons I speak to people like yourself and many other veterans who are talking on the point. So thank you for the prep and the support. And of course, till next time, sir, for another subject. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, Aadi. Thank you to viewers. Jai Hind to all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.